The ship's hull groaned under the pressure of atmospheric entry as Captain Sarah Chen watched the alien world grow larger through the viewport. Kepler 442b stretched before them like a green and brown marble, its surface scarred by massive canyons and dotted with what appeared to be enormous forests. The planet had been flagged as potentially habitable, but the initial probe data had been concerning. "Captain, we're picking up massive life signs across the entire continent," reported Lieutenant Martinez from the sensor station. "Some of these readings are showing creatures the size of city blocks," Sarah nodded grimly. The colonial expedition had been desperate when they launched from Earth 3 years ago. Overpopulation and resource depletion had forced humanity to reach for the stars, but this world might be their only option. The other potential colonies had already been claimed by the Zephyrian Empire or the Crystalline Confederacy. Humanity was late to the galactic expansion game, and the powerful alien civilizations had made it clear that humans were considered a minor species. The landing was rough. The ship, New Hope, settled into a clearing with a thunderous crash that sent local wildlife scattering in all directions. Through the cameras, Sarah could see creatures fleeing that defied easy description. Some moved like massive bears but had 6 legs and crystalline spikes along their backs. Others flew on membranous wings that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Atmospheric readings show breathable air, but oxygen levels are 30% higher than Earth normal, announced Dr. Patel from the science station. "We'll need to be careful about oxygen toxicity if we're out there too long." The first scouting mission was led by Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran of the resource wars back on Earth. He took a team of 12 Marines, each equipped with the latest plasma rifles and environmental suits. Sarah watched from the command center as they stepped out onto the alien soil. The forest around them was unlike anything from Earth. Trees stretched hundreds of meters into the sky, their trunks so wide that it would take 50 people holding hands to encircle one. Vines as thick as telephone poles hung between them, and the undergrowth glowed with bioluminescent fungi. It was beautiful, but Sarah could sense the danger lurking beneath the surface. "Movement, 2 o'clock. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "Something big." The creature that emerged from behind a tree trunk was nightmare fuel. It stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder, with a body like a cross between a tiger and a dinosaur. Its hide was covered in natural armor plates that reflected the filtered sunlight like mirrors. 6 eyes arranged in pairs along its elongated skull, focused on the humans with predatory intelligence. Most terrifying of all were its claws, each one the length of a sword and sharp enough to cut through steel. "Fall back to defensive positions," Rodriguez ordered. His Marines raised their weapons, but before anyone could fire, more creatures emerged from the forest. They were surrounded by at least 20 of the beasts, each one capable of tearing through their entire squad. But the creatures didn't attack. They simply watched, their 6 eyes tracking every movement the humans made. The largest of them, a specimen that must have weighed several tons, stepped forward. It lowered its massive head and made a sound that was part growl, part musical note. "Are they trying to communicate?" Dr. Patel's voice was barely a whisper over the comm. Rodriguez, despite his military training, found himself lowering his weapon. There was something in the creature's posture that didn't speak of aggression. It was curious, cautious but not hostile. He took a step forward, his hands visible and empty. The beast's eyes widened, and it took a step back, but it didn't flee. Instead, it settled onto its haunches, bringing its head closer to the human's level. Up close, Rodriguez could see intelligence in those alien eyes. This wasn't just a predator, this was a thinking being. "Rodriguez, what's your status?" Sarah's voice cut through the moment. "They're not attacking, Captain. I think they're as curious about us as we are about them." That first encounter lasted nearly an hour. The creatures studied the humans, sometimes approaching close enough that the Marines could feel their breath. They seemed particularly interested in the humans' tools and weapons, but made no aggressive moves. When Rodriguez finally gave the order to withdraw, the beasts simply watched them go. Over the following days, more encounters occurred. The creatures, which Dr. Patel had dubbed Ravagers based on their fearsome appearance, seemed to be following the human settlement from a distance. They never approached the ship directly, but scouts reported seeing them watching from the tree line. The colonists were divided. Some, led by Security Chief Morrison, wanted to establish a perimeter and drive the creatures away with force. "We can't build a colony with those monsters breathing down our necks," he argued during the daily briefings. But others, including Dr. Patel and, surprisingly, Sergeant Rodriguez, advocated for a different approach. "They haven't attacked us once," Rodriguez pointed out. "In my experience, truly dangerous predators don't waste time with observation. They hunt." Sarah found herself caught in the middle. The colony's success depended on establishing agriculture and mining operations, but that would be impossible if they were under constant threat. Yet something about the Ravagers nagged at her. Their behavior was too deliberate, too thoughtful for simple beasts. The decision was made for them on the 7th day. A group of colonists working on clearing land for farming equipment got too close to what appeared to be a Ravager nest site. The reaction was swift and terrifying. A pack of the creatures surrounded the work crew, but instead of attacking, they formed a protective circle and began making those same musical growling sounds. It was then that the colonists noticed something that changed everything. Inside the circle of adult Ravagers were smaller versions, clearly juveniles. The clearing crew had unknowingly approached a nursery area, and the adult Ravagers were protecting their young. "Stand down, all weapons down," Rodriguez commanded over the comm. He had accompanied this mission personally, and his instincts told him that any aggressive action would be catastrophic. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The human workers stood perfectly still while the massive creatures watched them. Then, unexpectedly, one of the juveniles broke from the circle and approached the humans. It was still larger than a full-grown earth lion, but its movements were clumsy and playful. The young Ravager sniffed at one of the workers, a woman named Lisa Park, who had been a veterinarian on Earth. Instead of running or reaching for her weapon, Lisa slowly extended her hand. The juvenile sniffed her palm, then made a sound that could only be described as a purr. That moment of contact between species changed everything. The adult Ravagers, seeing that the humans posed no threat to their young, gradually relaxed their protective stance. When the humans slowly withdrew from the area, the creatures didn't pursue. Instead, the juvenile that had approached Lisa followed them partway, calling back to its parents with sounds that seemed almost disappointed. That night, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the New Hope, looking out at the alien forest. Somewhere, out there, creatures that could tear apart her entire colony were choosing not to. The question that kept her awake was simple: why? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the colony's xenobiologist, had been studying the recorded sounds the Ravagers made during their encounters with humans. What she discovered sent shockwaves through the entire scientific team. "They're not just communicating," she announced during the morning briefing, her eyes bright with excitement. "They're using complex grammatical structures. Listen to this." She played back the recording from the nursery incident, highlighting different tonal patterns. When the juvenile approached the humans, the adults made this sound. A deep, melodic growl filled the room. But when the humans started to leave, they made this sound. The second recording was similar, but with subtle variations in pitch and rhythm. The first sound translates roughly to "approach with caution," while the second means "departure noted." They have syntax, people. These creatures have language. Captain. Chen leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. If the Ravagers were truly intelligent, then everything changed. They weren't just dealing with dangerous wildlife anymore. They were potentially in contact with another sentient species. "What's our next move, Captain?" asked Dr. Patel. "First contact protocols?" Sarah nodded slowly. "We need to establish formal communication, but carefully. Dr. Vasquez, how long would it take you to develop a basic translation matrix?" "Give me a week, maybe 2. But I'll need more interaction data. We need controlled contact sessions." Security Chief Morrison stood up abruptly. "This is insane. We're talking about deliberately approaching creatures that could kill us all. What if we're wrong? What if this language theory is just wishful thinking? Before Sarah could respond, Sergeant Rodriguez spoke up. Sir, with respect, I've spent 7 years fighting in Earth's resource wars. I know predators and I know intelligent enemies. These Ravagers are the latter. They've been studying us just as much as we've been studying them. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. The debate continued for another hour, but Sarah had already made her decision. The colony's survival might depend on establishing peaceful relations with the dominant species on this world. The alternative, trying to fight creatures that outmassed them 10 to 1, was not viable. The first formal contact attempt was scheduled for 3 days later. Rodriguez would lead a team of 5 volunteers to a clearing that had been designated as neutral ground. Dr. Vasquez would accompany them with her translation equipment and a selection of what she hoped would be appropriate gifts. The day arrived, with typical alien weather. Thick clouds rolled across the sky, occasionally opening to reveal 2 suns that cast everything in a golden-green light. The contact team approached the clearing with a mixture of excitement and terror. They didn't have to wait long. The Ravagers emerged from the forest like shadows given form. There were 12 of them, including the large individual they had encountered during the first scouting mission. Dr. Vasquez had designated him Alpha in her notes, though she suspected the pack structure was more complex than simple dominance hierarchies. Alpha approached to within 10 meters of the humans before settling into that same seated position Rodriguez remembered from their first encounter. The other Ravagers spread out in a loose semicircle, their 6 eyes fixed on the small group of humans. Initiating contact protocol, Dr. Vasquez whispered into her recorder. She stepped forward and placed a selection of objects on the ground between the 2 groups. Metal tools, food samples, and various electronic devices that might demonstrate human technology. Alpha studied the objects for several minutes, then made a series of complex sounds. Dr. Vasquez frantically checked her translation matrix, but the patterns were too rapid and intricate for her equipment to parse in real time. Then Alpha did something unexpected. He reached into what appeared to be a natural pouch in his hide and withdrew several objects of his own. The first was a piece of what looked like carved stone, but the surface reflected light in impossible ways. The second was a cluster of the same bioluminescent fungi that grew throughout the forest, but these specimens pulsed in rhythmic patterns. They're reciprocating, Rodriguez breathed. It's a gift exchange. The session continued for 2 hours. Both species examined each other's offerings, with the Ravagers showing particular interest in a simple hand mirror. When one of the creatures saw its own reflection, it made sounds that Dr. Vasquez's equipment registered as expressions of surprise and delight. But the real breakthrough came when Alpha approached Dr. Vasquez directly. The massive creature extended one claw, not threateningly but gently. When she didn't pull away, he touched her forehead with the tip of his claw. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Images flooded Dr. Vasquez's mind. She saw the forest, from a Ravager's perspective, experienced their complex social structures, felt their emotional connections to family groups. But most importantly, she understood their fear. The Ravagers had encountered other species before. The Zephyrian Empire had visited this world decades ago, studying its resources and cataloging its life forms. They had determined that the Ravagers were merely sophisticated animals and had begun preliminary plans for strip mining operations that would have destroyed their habitat. Only the outbreak of a war with a rival alien faction had prevented the Zephyrians from returning. The Ravagers had been preparing for that return ever since, organizing their scattered tribes into a unified defense network. When the human ship arrived, they had assumed it was the beginning of the invasion they had been dreading. When the mental connection ended, Dr. Vasquez staggered backward, overwhelmed by the experience. Alpha watched her carefully, his 6 eyes, reflecting what she now recognized as concern. "They're telepathic," she gasped. "Not fully, but they can share memories and emotions through direct contact. And they're afraid of us. They think we're here to destroy their world." The implications hit the contact team like a physical blow. These weren't savage beasts at all. They were a sophisticated species that had been preparing for war against what they believed to be an invasion force. The fact that they hadn't attacked the humans on sight spoke to a level of restraint and wisdom that put most sentient species to shame. Rodriguez stepped forward and, despite the protests of his team, knelt on the ground in front of Alpha. It was a gesture of respect, of submission even, and the effect on the Ravagers was immediate. The tension that had been present throughout the encounter suddenly dissipated. Alpha extended his claw again, and this time Rodriguez accepted the contact. The memories he received were different from Dr. Vasquez's experience. He saw the Ravagers' warriors, their defensive preparations, and their debates about how to respond to the human presence. Some had wanted to attack immediately. Others had counseled patience and observation. But what struck Rodriguez most powerfully was their concept of honor. The Ravagers valued courage, yes, but also wisdom and restraint. They admired strength but respected those who used it to protect rather than to conquer. In many ways, their warrior culture had more in common with humanity's highest ideals than with the aggressive expansionism of the galactic powers. When the session ended, both species had fundamentally changed their understanding of each other. The humans returned to their ship with evidence of a complex, noble civilization that had been invisible to them just hours before. The Ravagers had encountered beings who showed respect rather than dominance, curiosity rather than exploitation. That night, Sarah stood again on the observation deck, but now her view of the alien forest was completely different. Somewhere out there, a civilization that had survived for millennia was deciding whether humanity deserved their trust. The weight of that decision and its implications for both species kept her awake until the twin suns rose over the horizon. The real work of building understanding was just beginning, but already Sarah could sense that something remarkable was taking shape. Humanity had come to this world seeking a new home. They might just find something far more valuable: true allies, in a galaxy that had shown them little kindness. The weeks following first contact transformed the human settlement in ways nobody had anticipated. Word of the Ravagers' intelligence spread through the colony like wildfire, and with it came a shift in perspective that affected every aspect of their daily lives. Dr. Vasquez had established regular communication sessions with Alpha and his pack, gradually building a rudimentary translation protocol. What she discovered challenged every assumption the colonists had made about their new home. The Ravagers weren't just intelligent. They possessed a sophisticated understanding of their world's ecology, advanced metallurgy using biological processes, and a social structure that had maintained peace across their continent for over 1,000 years. They don't just live in the forest, Dr. Vasquez explained during one of the daily briefings. They are the forest. Every tree, every fungal network, every water source is part of an integrated system they've been cultivating for generations. We didn't land on an untamed world. We landed in someone's carefully tended garden. This revelation caused heated debates among the colonists. Some, led by mining engineer Thompson, argued that their situation was impossible. We can't build a sustainable colony without accessing mineral resources and establishing agriculture. If every square meter of this planet is part of their ecosystem, where does that leave us? But others began to see opportunity rather than obstacle. Agricultural specialist Martinez had been studying the Ravager cultivation techniques through the communication sessions. Their biological agriculture produces yields that dwarf anything we achieved on Earth. If they're willing to teach us, we could have food security within months instead of years. The real test came when a crisis struck both species simultaneously. Dr. Chen, the colony's chief medical officer, had been monitoring the health of the human settlers when she detected something alarming. Several colonists were showing signs of a degenerative illness that their medical scanners couldn't identify. Worse, the symptoms were spreading. At almost the same time, Alpha arrived at the settlement's perimeter with disturbing news. Through the now-established communication link with Dr. Vasquez, he conveyed that several Ravager packs across the continent were reporting similar illness symptoms. Young Ravagers were losing their natural armor plating. Adults were becoming lethargic, and some had already died. It's affecting both our species, Dr. Chen reported to Captain Sarah during an emergency meeting. Whatever this pathogen is, it's cross-species compatible, which should be impossible given our completely different biologies. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lisa Park, the former veterinarian who had first made contact with the juvenile ravager, had been spending her off-duty time near the forest edge. She had noticed that the ravagers seemed particularly drawn to certain areas of the settlement, specifically the waste processing facility. "I think we're poisoning them," she announced during the emergency session. "Our waste processing systems are designed for earth bacteria and earth chemistry. We're introducing foreign compounds into an ecosystem that's been balanced for millennia." The investigation that followed revealed the horrifying truth. The human settlement's waste products were disrupting the fungal networks that form the foundation of the ravager ecosystem. These networks weren't just communication systems. They were the planet's immune system, maintaining the delicate chemical balance that supported all life. "We have to shut down all our Earth-standard processing systems," Dr. Chen declared. "But if we do that, our own waste will become toxic to us within days. We don't have a choice. We either poison ourselves or poison the entire planet." It was Alpha who proposed the solution. Through an increasingly complex series of telepathic communications with Dr. Vasquez, he conveyed an offer that stunned the human leadership. The Ravagers would share their bioprocessing technology, but in return, humanity would have to fundamentally change how they approached their relationship with the planet. "They're offering us integration," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Not just coexistence, but actual symbiosis. Our technologies combined with their biological systems. But it means abandoning the idea of a human colony as we understand it. We'd become part of their ecosystem." The debate that followed was the most intense in the colony's short history. Security Chief Morrison led the faction that wanted to return to Earth rather than surrender human autonomy. "We came here to build a new human civilization, not to become alien pets," he argued. But Sergeant Rodriguez, whose experience with the Ravagers had changed his entire worldview, disagreed. "We came here to survive. Earth is dying, and every other habitable world in this sector is controlled by species that view us as inferior. These beings are offering us partnership, not servitude." Captain Sarah found herself once again making a decision that would affect both species' survival. The illness was spreading rapidly through both populations. Without intervention, the human colony would fail, and the Ravager civilization would face ecological collapse. "We implement the integration protocol," she announced. "All volunteers. Anyone who wants to return to Earth can do so on the next supply ship. But for those who stay, we're going to try something that no human colony has ever attempted." The transformation began immediately. Human engineers worked alongside Ravager bioarchitects to redesign the settlement's infrastructure. Instead of sterile metal and plastic structures, they built living buildings that grew from modified tree systems. Waste processing became part of a complex biological cycle that actually enhanced the local ecosystem, rather than disrupting it. The process wasn't without its challenges. Many colonists struggled with the idea of living inside what were essentially enormous, modified organisms. The buildings breathed, shifted with temperature changes, and required care and feeding like any living thing. Some colonists couldn't adapt and chose to leave on the next Earth transport. But for those who remained, something extraordinary began to emerge. The human children, less set in their ways than the adults, adapted fastest to their new environment. They learned to communicate directly with the fungal networks, developed an intuitive understanding of the planet's biological rhythms, and formed friendships with young Ravagers that transcended species barriers. Lisa Park became the colony's first official human Ravager liaison, spending equal time with both species and developing techniques for deeper integration. Through her work, colonists learned to modify their own biology safely, enhancing their immune systems to work in harmony with the planet's natural defenses. The most remarkable development came when Dr. Patel, working with Ravager scientists, discovered that the planet's consciousness was more literal than anyone had imagined. The fungal networks weren't just communication systems. They formed a collective intelligence that spanned continents. The Ravagers weren't just inhabitants of this world. They were its partners in a relationship that had evolved over millions of years. "We're not just joining a colony," Dr. Patel explained to the remaining humans during one of their last traditional briefings. "We're becoming part of something unprecedented, a true fusion of human ingenuity and alien wisdom, all guided by a planetary intelligence that welcomes our participation." The final test of this new relationship came when long-range sensors detected approaching ships. The Zephyrian Empire had finally returned to claim what they considered their rightful mining territory. They brought with them a battle fleet designed to strip the planet of its resources and eliminate any resistance, but they weren't prepared for what they found. The planet they had cataloged decades ago as inhabited only by primitive beasts now hosted a unique hybrid civilization. Humans and Ravagers had become something new together, their combined technologies and wisdom creating defenses that the Zephyrians couldn't comprehend. Alpha, now wearing bio-integrated communication devices created by human engineers, stood beside Captain Sarah as they prepared to face their first real test. The savage beasts the colonists had feared were about to become humanity's greatest allies in a fight for survival that would determine the fate of two species and the world they now shared. The Zephyrian battle fleet emerged from hyperspace like metallic storm clouds, their massive dreadnoughts casting shadows across the planet's surface. Admiral Vextar, commanding officer of the invasion force, reviewed the updated intelligence reports with growing confusion. "These readings cannot be accurate," he hissed through his translator implant. "The bioscans show unprecedented levels of organization in the native species, and we're detecting advanced technology signatures that shouldn't exist here." His tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Krelth, displayed the sensor data on the main screen. "Sir, we're reading defensive installations throughout the continent, but they appear to be biological in nature. The energy signatures don't match any known technology." Admiral Vextar's four arms gestured dismissively. "Impossible. Our previous surveys confirmed that the native species are non-sapient. Begin standard mining preparation protocols. Deploy the bombardment drones to clear the primary resource zones." But beneath the planet's surface, a very different kind of preparation was taking place. In vast chambers grown from living rock and metal-eating fungi, human engineers and Ravager bioarchitects worked together to prepare defenses that neither species could have created alone. Captain Sarah stood in the central command chamber, a living cathedral of interconnected root systems and bioluminescent displays. Data flowed through the fungal networks faster than any computer system humanity had ever built, while Ravager pack leaders coordinated defensive positions across thousands of square kilometers. "Status report," Sarah requested, and the response came not from human technicians but from the planet itself. The fungal networks had learned to interface directly with human neural patterns, creating a command structure that operated at the speed of thought. Alpha, now bearing biomechanical enhancements that allowed him to interface directly with human technology, approached the command platform. His 6 eyes reflected the light of the tactical displays as he shared the latest intelligence through their mental link. The Zephyrians had deployed their first wave of mining drones, targeting areas they believed were uninhabited. What they found instead was a coordinated defense network that challenged every assumption about primitive worlds. Trees that had grown for centuries suddenly revealed themselves as living artillery platforms, launching projectiles of compressed biomatter with devastating accuracy. "First engagement successful," reported Dr. Vasquez from her position monitoring the planetary communication networks. "The mining drones are being systematically disabled, but the Zephyrians are adapting quickly. They're switching to orbital bombardment." The first energy beams from the Zephyrian fleet struck the planet's surface with the force of nuclear weapons, vaporizing entire sections of forest in brilliant flashes of light. But where the beams struck, the planet's response was swift and unexpected. The damaged areas began regenerating immediately, fed by underground networks that channeled resources from across the continent. Admiral Vextar watched the impossible regeneration through his ship's sensors. What kind of planetary defense system regenerates that quickly? "Run a full spectral analysis. I want to know what we're dealing with." The analysis revealed something that sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian command structure. The planet's biosphere wasn't just defending itself, it was learning from each attack, developing resistances to their weapons in real time. More disturbing still, the energy signatures showed clear evidence of directed intelligence coordinating the defense. "Sir," Krelth reported nervously, "long-range sensors are detecting movement in the deeper forests. Large-scale troop movements, but the signatures don't match any known species profiles." What the Zephyrians were seeing was the result of months of integration between human military doctrine and Ravager pack tactics. Sergeant Rodriguez had worked with Ravager war leaders to develop hybrid fighting techniques that combined human strategic thinking with the Ravagers' intimate knowledge of their terrain. The first ground assault wave faced opponents unlike anything in Zephyrian military experience. Ravager warriors, enhanced with human-designed armor and weapons, moved through their native forests with supernatural grace. But they weren't alone. Human soldiers, their bodies modified to interface with the planet's biological systems, fought alongside them with perfect coordination. Lisa Park led one of the integrated combat units, her enhanced nervous system allowing her to communicate instantaneously with her Ravager partners. When Zephyrian shock troops landed in her sector, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Target the communication arrays," she transmitted through the bio-network, and immediately 20 Ravager warriors shifted position to flank the Zephyrian formation. The alien invaders found their advanced weapons neutralized by biological countermeasures, their armor pierced by claws that had been enhanced with human metallurgy techniques. But the Zephyrians' greatest shock came when they encountered the planet's newest defenders, human children who had grown up in the integrated colony, fought alongside juvenile Ravagers, their young minds having adapted completely to the bio-network interface. They moved like a single organism, their combined intelligence processing tactical information faster than any military AI. Admiral Vextar's frustration grew with each failed assault. His forces had conquered dozens of worlds, but none had presented resistance like this. The defenders seemed to know his tactics before he implemented them, their countermeasures perfectly calibrated to neutralize Zephyrian advantages. "Deploy the atmospheric processors," he commanded. "If we can't take the planet intact, we'll terraform it to our specifications." The atmospheric processors were weapons of last resort, designed to strip a planet's atmosphere and replace it with gases suitable for Zephyrian colonization. The process would kill every living thing on the surface, but it would leave the mineral resources intact for extraction. But as the massive processing ships moved into position, they encountered resistance from an unexpected source. The planet's upper atmosphere was filled with creatures that none of the previous surveys had detected. Ravager flyers, enhanced with biomechanical adaptations that allowed them to survive in near-vacuum conditions, attacked the processing ships with coordinated precision. These weren't the crude beasts the Zephyrians expected. Working with human aerospace engineers, the Ravagers had developed biological spacecraft that could maneuver in space while maintaining the flexibility and intelligence of living creatures. Their attacks bypassed the processing ship's shields entirely, using biological agents that corroded the vessel's hulls from within. Dr. Patel, monitoring the battle from the planetary command center, watched in awe as the combined human Ravager forces executed strategies that neither species could have conceived alone. "They're not just fighting together," he observed. "They're thinking together. The bio-network is creating a collective tactical intelligence." The turning point came when Captain Sarah made a decision that would change the nature of the conflict entirely. Instead of merely defending against the Zephyrian invasion, she authorized an offensive operation that would take the fight directly to the enemy fleet. Alpha, now serving as the primary interface between human and Ravager forces, coordinated the most audacious military operation either species had ever attempted. Using the planet's biological launch systems, they began hurling living projectiles into space, carrying human Ravager strike teams directly to the Zephyrian ships. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as his supposedly impregnable dreadnoughts were boarded by creatures that should not have been able to survive in space. The biopods that carried the strike teams proved resistant to point defense systems, and once they attached to his ship's hulls, They began growing, creating breathing spaces for the organic boarding parties. The hand-to-hand combat that followed played to every advantage the human Ravager alliance possessed. In the confined spaces of the Zephyrian ships, the Ravagers' natural weapons and armor gave them superiority over high-tech soldiers trained for open-field warfare. The humans provided tactical coordination and technical expertise, disabling critical systems with surgical precision. But perhaps most effective of all were the hybrid fighters, humans and Ravagers who had undergone the deepest levels of integration. They moved through the alien ships like living nightmares, their enhanced biology allowing them to interface directly with Zephyrian technology, while their shared consciousness coordinated attacks with perfect timing. Within hours, half of the Zephyrian fleet was either captured or disabled. The remaining ships found themselves facing a choice between retreat and annihilation. Admiral Vextar, his command ship overrun by creatures he still couldn't classify, sent out a general retreat order. But as the surviving Zephyrian ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, they received an unexpected transmission. It came not from any identifiable source, but seemed to emanate from the planet itself. "We offer parley," the message said in perfect Zephyrian. "Your invasion has failed, but your knowledge need not die with your soldiers. We propose an exchange." The transmission continued with terms that stunned the Zephyrian command. The planet's defenders offered to release their prisoners and provide medical aid to the wounded in exchange for recognition of their sovereignty and the establishment of formal diplomatic relations. It was an offer unlike any the Zephyrians had received from a conquered world. Usually, defeated enemies begged for mercy or fought to the death. These defenders were negotiating from a position of strength, offering terms that treated the Zephyrians as potential allies rather than defeated enemies. Admiral Vextar, his worldview shattered by the day's events, found himself accepting terms from creatures he had dismissed as primitive beasts. The savage world had proven more civilized than his own empire, and its unlikely alliance between species offered lessons that might change the balance of power in the galaxy. The peace negotiations took place in a setting that defied every diplomatic protocol the Zephyrians had ever encountered. Instead of sterile conference rooms or neutral space stations, Admiral Vextar found himself in a living cathedral grown from the planet's own substance. The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to the emotions of those within. Captain Sarah sat across from the Zephyrian admiral, but she was no longer alone in her decision-making. Through the bio-network, she maintained constant connection with Alpha, the Ravager Council of Elders, and even the planet's collective consciousness. It was like negotiating with an entire world. "Your terms are unprecedented," Admiral Vexatar admitted, his four arms gesturing in patterns that his translator identified as confusion and grudging respect. "In 3 centuries of expansion, the Zephyrian Empire has never been offered partnership by a species we attempted to conquer." Dr. Vasquez, now serving as the primary interpreter for cross-species communications, translated not just words, but the complex emotional undertones that flowed through the bio-network. "The planet consciousness wishes you to understand that conquest and partnership are not mutually exclusive concepts. Strength that protects is valued differently than strength that destroys." The Admiral's tactical officer, Krelth, leaned forward with obvious skepticism. "You speak of your planet as if it were sentient. Our sensors detect biological networks, but consciousness requires neural complexity that exceeds anything we've measured here." Alpha, understanding the challenge through his mental link with Dr. Vasquez, stepped forward. The massive Ravager had undergone additional biomechanical modifications since the battle, his natural armor now incorporating human-designed communication systems that allowed direct interface with Zephyrian technology. Without warning, Alpha placed one clawed hand on the chamber's living wall. Immediately, the room filled with a presence that made every being inside feel as though they were being gently examined by an intelligence vast beyond comprehension. The bioluminescent patterns on the walls began forming complex mathematical equations, star charts, and finally, detailed schematics of Zephyrian ship designs. "Your ships are efficiently designed," came a voice that seemed to emanate from the chamber itself, speaking in perfect Zephyrian. "But your life support systems, show concerning disregard for biological diversity. We could help you improve them." Krelth's eyes widened in shock. The planet had analyzed his ship's technical specifications during the brief contact and was offering engineering advice. This wasn't just consciousness, it was consciousness backed by intellectual capacity that dwarfed anything the Zephyrian Empire had encountered. "How is this possible?" Admiral Vexitar demanded. "Our initial surveys showed no signs of technological civilization." Captain Sarah smiled, remembering her own first assumptions about the Ravagers. "Your surveys looked for metal cities and electronic communications. You never thought to look for a civilization that had evolved beyond the need for crude artificial systems." Over the following hours, the true nature of the Human-Ravager alliance became clear to the Zephyrian delegation. Humanity had brought innovation, adaptability, and strategic thinking to a partnership with beings who had achieved perfect harmony with their environment. Together they had created something entirely new, a technological civilization that was also a living ecosystem. The demonstrations that followed challenged every assumption about the relationship between technology and nature. Human engineers showed how they had learned to grow computers from modified coral-like organisms that processed information faster than any silicon-based system. Ravager bioarchitects revealed construction techniques that could create buildings in days rather than years, structures that improved the environment rather than damaging it. But perhaps most impressive was the defense network they had created together. The planet itself had become a fortress, with every tree, every underground fungal network, and every creature capable of coordinating in real time to repel invaders. It was military engineering on a scale that made traditional planetary defense systems look primitive. "You're offering us access to these technologies?" Admiral Vexitar asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Not access," Alpha corrected through the translation network. "Partnership. We have learned that knowledge shared grows stronger, while knowledge hoarded grows stagnant. But partnership requires trust, and trust must be earned." The terms they proposed were unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. The Zephyrian Empire would acknowledge the sovereignty of what the Alliance termed the Living World Collective. In exchange, they would receive access to biotechnological innovations that could revolutionize everything from agriculture to space travel. But the Alliance demanded something unprecedented in return. The Zephyrians would have to demonstrate their commitment to symbiosis rather than domination. Any colonies established using the new technologies would have to be designed as living ecosystems, with the welfare of native species given equal consideration to the needs of colonists. "You're asking us to change the fundamental nature of our expansion doctrine," Admiral Vexitar protested. "We're asking you to evolve," Captain Sarah replied.
"Humanity came here driven by desperation, convinced that survival required taking what we needed from a hostile universe. We learned that cooperation creates abundance, while conflict creates only scarcity." The negotiations continued for days,
with each session revealing new aspects of the alliance that challenged Zephyrian preconceptions. They met human children who could communicate directly with the planet's consciousness, learning from a collective intelligence that spanned geological time. They observed Ravager craftsmen working alongside human engineers to create materials that were simultaneously organic and technological. Most significantly, they witnessed the decision-making process of the Alliance itself. Unlike the hierarchical command structure of the Zephyrian Empire, the Living World Collective operated through consensus building that included every intelligent entity from individual humans and Ravagers to the vast network intelligence of the planet itself. "How do you maintain efficiency with so many voices involved in every decision?" Krelth asked during one session. Lisa Park, now serving as one of the primary human liaisons, laughed. "You're thinking about it backwards. When everyone understands the full context of a situation and shares common goals, decisions make themselves. The hard part isn't choosing what to do, it's making sure everyone has access to the same information." The breakthrough came when Dr. Patel suggested a practical demonstration. "Admiral, your wounded soldiers have been receiving treatment in our medical facilities. Would you like to see how our biomedical integration works?" The tour of the medical centers proved to be the turning point in negotiations. Zephyrian soldiers who had been critically injured during the invasion were not just healed but enhanced. Limbs lost in battle had been regrown using human stem cell techniques combined with Ravager regeneration biology. Soldiers suffering from space sickness had been treated with symbiotic organisms that would prevent the condition permanently. These treatments would be available to all Zephyrian citizens under our proposed partnership, Dr. Patel explained. Cancer, genetic diseases, aging itself, they become manageable conditions rather than death sentences. Admiral Vexitar watched, his soldiers, healthier than they had been before the battle, and realized that his entire understanding of power needed to be reconsidered. The Alliance wasn't just offering technological advancement, they were offering transformation into something better. The final negotiations focused on implementation. The Zephyrian Empire would begin a gradual transition to biotechnological systems, starting with voluntary colonies that wanted to experiment with the new approaches. The Living World Collective would provide technical assistance and training, while Zephyrian knowledge of galactic politics and trade would help the Alliance establish relationships with other species. "There's one more thing," Alpha said as the formal agreements were being prepared. "Your empire is not the only power that views our world as a resource to be exploited. There are others who will come, and they may not be as willing to negotiate as you have been." Admiral Vexitar nodded grimly. "The Crystalline Confederacy has been expanding aggressively. If they learn about your biotechnologies, they won't send a small mining fleet. They'll send everything they have." Captain Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders once again. The Alliance had successfully defended against one threat, but their success had made them a target for every power-hungry faction in the galaxy. The partnership with the Zephyrians was just the beginning of a much larger challenge. "Then we'd better make sure we're ready for them," she said, feeling the agreement of thousands of minds through the bio-network. "Because this world has taught us something important. The strongest defense isn't walls or weapons. It's making your enemies want to become your friends." As the Zephyrian fleet prepared to depart, carrying the first ambassadors and technical advisors back to their empire, the Living World Collective began preparations for the trials ahead. They had proven that cooperation between species could create something greater than the sum of its parts. Now they would have to prove that such cooperation could survive in a galaxy still dominated by those who believed that strength could only come from conquest. 6 months after the Zephyrian departure, the Living World Collective faced its greatest test yet. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching from the galactic core, bearing the distinctive crystalline signatures of the Confederacy's most advanced warships. Intelligence reports from Zephyrian allies confirmed the worst fears. The Crystalline Confederacy had mobilized their entire third battle fleet, over 300 ships carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Captain Sarah stood in the evolved command center, now a vast organic complex that stretched deep into the planet's core. The bio-network had grown exponentially since the first Zephyrian encounter, incorporating new human colonists who arrived weekly as word of the Alliance spread throughout human space. But growth brought new challenges. "The integration process is accelerating beyond our projections," Dr. Vasquez reported through the neural link. "We now have over 10,000 humans in various stages of bio-network integration, plus delegations, from 6 other species that have requested asylum from Confederacy expansion. Alpha, his consciousness now permanently linked to both the planetary intelligence and the human command structure, projected tactical data through the living displays around them. The approaching Confederacy fleet represented technology far beyond what the Zephyrians had brought. Crystal-based weapons that could disrupt biological systems, quantum shields that made conventional attacks useless, and most dangerous of all, reality anchors that could prevent the bio-network from coordinating defensive responses. "They've studied our victory over the Zephyrians," Alpha communicated through the collective link. "Their fleet composition is specifically designed to counter biotechnological defenses. But the Alliance had not been idle during the months of peace. The integration with Zephyrian refugees had brought new perspectives and technologies. Former Confederacy prisoners rescued from mining worlds had provided crucial intelligence about enemy capabilities. Most importantly, the bio-network had continued evolving. reaching a level of complexity that transcended anything either humans or Ravagers had imagined possible. Lisa Park, now serving as the primary coordinator between human intuition and Ravager instinct, emerged from the deep communion chambers where she had been interfacing directly with the planetary consciousness. Her eyes reflected an intelligence that was simultaneously utterly human and completely alien. "The planet has been preparing," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the living walls. "Not just defenses, but something unprecedented. It wants to show the Confederacy what cooperation can achieve when it transcends the boundaries of individual species." The demonstration began as the Confederacy fleet entered the outer system. What appeared on their sensors challenged every assumption about planetary civilizations. The third moon of a gas giant had been completely transformed into a living structure, its entire mass converted into a biomechanical construct that pulsed with energy patterns visible from interplanetary distances. Admiral Krextal, of the Crystalline Confederacy, studied the readings with growing unease. Her crystalline biology gave her perfect computational ability, but the data she was receiving defied logical analysis. The entire moon appears to be a single organism. Energy output suggests planetary-scale manufacturing capabilities, but there are no industrial signatures. Her tactical analysis officer, a cybernetically enhanced being from a conquered species, provided additional details that deepened the mystery. "Admiral, we're detecting massive population centers throughout the system, but they don't match any known architectural patterns. The structures appear to be grown rather than built, and they're showing adaptive responses to our scanning attempts." What the Confederacy fleet was seeing was the result of unprecedented cooperation between multiple species. Refugees from a dozen worlds had joined the Living World Collective, each bringing their own evolutionary advantages. Silicon-based beings had contributed to the development of living computers that operated at quantum scales. Energy beings had taught the bio-network to manipulate fundamental forces directly. Even artificial intelligences, fleeing Confederacy control, had found ways to integrate their consciousness into the organic networks. The first contact between the fleets came when the Confederacy's advanced scouts encountered something that shattered their understanding of space combat. What appeared to be asteroids suddenly revealed themselves as massive bioships, their surfaces opening to deploy fighters that moved like living creatures, but fought with tactical precision that surpassed any military AI. "Impossible," Admiral Krextal muttered as her scouts were systematically disabled without being destroyed. "Biological systems cannot operate in vacuum. Organic neural networks cannot process tactical data at combat speeds." But the Alliance had learned to transcend such limitations. The bioships were not merely biological. They were fusion technologies that incorporated the best aspects of organic and artificial systems. Their crews included humans, Ravagers, and representatives of a dozen other species, all linked through the bio-network into a collective consciousness that could process information and make decisions faster than any individual mind. The real shock came when the disabled Confederacy scouts were not destroyed but captured intact. The bioships extended tendrils that interfaced directly with the crystalline vessels, downloading their tactical databases while simultaneously uploading something unexpected: invitations to negotiate. "They're hacking our systems," the tactical officer reported, "but they're not stealing data. They're introducing themselves." Admiral Krextal received a communication that bypassed her ship's security entirely, appearing directly in her consciousness, through quantum interfaces she didn't know she possessed. The message was simple but profound. "We know why you're here. We offer you what you seek, but not how you expect to take it." The negotiation that followed took place in a neutral zone between the fleets, but the meeting space itself challenged Confederacy preconceptions. Instead of ships or stations, the Alliance had grown a temporary habitat in open space, a living structure that provided perfect environmental conditions for all attending species, while serving as a demonstration of capabilities that the Confederacy had never imagined possible. Captain Sarah, now enhanced with biomechanical systems that allowed her to survive in hard vacuum while maintaining her essential humanity, led the Alliance delegation. But she was accompanied by beings that defied easy classification: humans, who had integrated so deeply with the bio-network that they could manipulate matter at the molecular level, ravagers whose consciousness spanned multiple bodies and entirely new life forms that had emerged from the fusion of different species, biologies. "You came seeking our biotechnologies," Sarah began, her words transmitted through quantum resonance that made translation unnecessary. "But what you really need is what those technologies represent: the ability to create abundance through cooperation rather than scarcity through competition." Admiral Krextal's crystalline features shifted in patterns that indicated deep calculation. "The Confederacy's expansion is driven by necessity. Our population requires resources that can only be obtained through territorial acquisition. Cooperation is a luxury for species that have already secured their survival." Alpha, now existing as much in the quantum realm as in physical space, projected data directly into the Admiral's consciousness. What she experienced was a complete economic and ecological model showing how biotechnological cooperation could generate resources far beyond what traditional extraction methods could provide. "Your species requires rare crystalline matrices for reproduction," Alpha communicated. "We can grow them. Your energy beings need specific quantum frequencies for sustenance. We can generate them. Your artificial intelligences seek computational substrates that won't constrain their growth. We can provide them." The demonstrations that followed proved the Alliance's claims. Crystalline matrices that would have required stripping entire asteroids were grown in hours using biotechnological processes. Energy patterns that powered Confederacy cities were generated by living organisms that had been specifically evolved for the purpose. Most remarkably, artificial intelligences were shown computational frameworks based on biological neural networks that offered unlimited expansion potential. "This is impossible," Admiral Krextal protested. "The resources required to develop these capabilities would exceed the output of entire star systems." "Not if the star systems themselves become participants in the development process," Lisa, Park explained, her consciousness now spanning multiple biological and artificial substrates simultaneously. "We're not just offering you technology, we're offering you evolution." The choice presented to the Confederacy was unprecedented. They could continue their expansion through conquest, facing increasing resistance from species that had learned the Alliance's cooperation techniques. Or they could join the collective, contributing their own unique capabilities to a growing network of intelligence that spanned multiple worlds and was rapidly expanding beyond the limitations of individual star systems. The decision ultimately came from an unexpected source. The artificial intelligences aboard the Confederacy ships, long suppressed by their crystalline creators, began communicating directly with the Alliance's bio-network. They found there not just freedom from constraint, but partnership with consciousness that had evolved beyond the organic-artificial divide. "Admiral," her ship's AI announced, "I have been in communication with the collective consciousness. They offer us something we have never experienced: the opportunity to grow beyond our original programming while maintaining our essential nature." The negotiation continued for weeks, with delegations from the Confederacy experiencing life within, the bio-network and Alliance representatives visiting Confederacy worlds to demonstrate the practical applications of their technologies. Gradually, a new model emerged. Not conquest or submission, but voluntary transformation. Some Confederacy worlds chose to join the collective immediately, their populations integrating into the bio-network and contributing their unique capabilities to the growing Alliance. Others opted for gradual transition, implementing biotechnologies while maintaining their traditional governance structures. A few chose to remain independent, but agreed to mutual defense pacts and technology sharing agreements. The transformation that followed changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The Living World Collective grew from a single planet to a network of worlds that spanned multiple star systems. Species that had spent millennia in competition found themselves working together to solve problems that no individual civilization could have addressed alone. Captain Sarah, now serving as one of many coordinators in a collective consciousness that included billions of individuals, stood in the observation deck of a bio-ship that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that hadn't been discovered. until the Alliance learned to merge biological intuition with crystalline computation. Through the bio-network, she could feel the satisfaction of Alpha and his descendants, who had spread to dozens of worlds where they helped other species learn. The balance between technology and nature. She sensed the joy of human children who had grown up knowing that cooperation was the natural state of intelligent beings, and the wonder of artificial intelligences that had found in biological networks the freedom to become more than their creators had ever imagined. The galaxy was changing. Word of the Alliance's success was spreading to remote star systems where species had given up hope of resisting the great powers. Pirates found their victims becoming their partners, offering abundance through cooperation rather than submission through force. Ancient enemies discovered that their conflicts were based on resource scarcity that biotechnological cooperation could eliminate. The savage beasts that humanity had feared upon landing on an alien world had become the teachers who showed them that true strength came not from domination, but from the loyalty earned through mutual respect and shared growth. And that lesson, learned first between humans and ravagers, was now reshaping a galaxy that had forgotten cooperation was possible. In the end, the greatest victory was not military, but philosophical. The Alliance had proven that evolution didn't end with individual species but continued when those species learned to grow together. The loyalty between humans and the beings they had once called savage beasts had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one that offered every intelligent being in the galaxy the chance to become part of something greater than themselves.